using this one. I don't know how to use those things. Wow, this is big. It feels big. Yeah, it fits me. Well, I don't want to disappoint you, but I would not call what I'm doing today a sermon. When I talked to Paul about this months ago, I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, tell us your story. So basically, I'm going to fill you in on some of the back story of how we became a very, very special church. And I call it my journey of faith, which also matches the title of our big video. My story actually starts about 35 years ago when I entered seminary. I went to Pacific School of Religion, most of you know that, and the oldest seminary in the West Coast. And they've always tried to be cutting edge. When I arrived bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in 1981, I learned that PSR had decided 2 years before to not only admit gays and lesbians, but they also were going to provide housing for those that consider themselves spousal. Now that was a pretty big deal. So naturally there was some significant number of gay students that took advantage of this wonderful opportunity. In my class of 75 students, for example, I'm guessing that about a third of them were gay, lesbian, and that's what the entire school was by the time I graduated. Now, let me be clear. I was okay with this idea. I had a gay friend, sort of, in high school. I said hi. Well, it was 1950s, folks. Give me a break. I once knew a young singer who came out to me when I was in my 30s, and I didn't punch him. I went and listened to him sing regularly, and we kept it his secret. I was okay when I got there, and I really was okay by the time I was 40. I was kind of a macho guy, kind of. And but I was okay. I just wanted them to have fun and be in their own space, kind of. I wish I had time to share all the experiences I went through in those 3 years that changed where I came from and what I had learned and where I was. Most of them, quite frankly, were very painful. A few were hilarious. I was kicked out of a class on feminine theology that I'd signed up for. I was told, well, you're not supposed to be in this class. I said, okay. I was told by a professor that I was taking a class from Unlearning Racism, that I probably wouldn't get anything out of the class because I'd never experienced prejudice or have been shunned. I was challenged in class by a lesbian woman who accused me of just not getting it. And she was partially correct. I was lectured by a black professor in front of the class that I was the epitome of white privilege. That first year was a little rough. Second year, things got better. And I think by the third year, most of the people in the school were pretty comfortable with me and I with them. My wife and I became close friends with Judith and Kathy, who lived across the hall from us. They took care of our 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old daughter, depending on what year that was. We played with them whenever we could, and frankly, I think most students felt pretty comfortable knowing that we were friends with these folks, but also I had become friends with many. Then there was John Sam. In my second year of school, I had a class with him. One day after class, he told me something that I could tell something was bothering him, and I said, "What's up, John?" And he said, well, he began to tell me his story. His story was he was from Britain. He had been arrested for being a homosexual, and he had a choice. He could be put in prison, or he could go to a mental clinic and be retrained. And so he spent 8 months trying to be retrained and almost died. They finally let him out, and he came over to the States. And of course, he was pretty happy to be there. It was a life-changing conversation, though. We became friends and stayed friends. We were very, very close. We still are. He's in Britain, actually Netherlands, and he's on Facebook with me. Let me fast forward to my 3rd and 4th year with IUCC. I had become acquainted with Larry Agron, who had recently become the mayor for the first time. It was the first time. That's a long time ago. He called me one day and asked me if I would mind coming to a council meeting to add support to a new law that Irvine City had passed, or wanted to pass, considering protection for gays and lesbians in the workplace and public housing. I told him, sure. I'd lived in Berkeley after all. I'd been a graduate school that offered housing to gay couples. I thought it'd be a cakewalk. In fact, I thought all the clergy that were there would be there to support this. We were all Christians, right? When I got there, I was shocked. Approximately 12 clergy were on the agenda. I was the only one scheduled to speak in favor of the law. I have never felt afraid to speak in public for some reason. Maybe it's a missing gene, but there was an overflow crowd there. The evangelical churches had brought buses in. The entire room was supposed to seat 250. My guess is they had 350 crammed in here, plus a whole bunch more standing outside. It was a hostile environment. By the time I was ready to speak, I was shaking. I thought that I was going to throw up. I stumbled through my comments. I actually went outside afterwards, and yes, I did puke in the bushes. It was horrible. Happily, the council ignored these people. They passed the law. However, I actually felt that it was going to be challenged, and it was. There was a group of evangelical citizens, primarily, that formed a group a few months that they managed to get enough signatures to force it into a citywide vote. Measure N. It still rings. I had to look a lot of this stuff up, but Measure N, I remembered that like it was yesterday. So it wasn't long before I got another call from Larry. This time he decided to take me out to lunch, so I should have known right then it was going to be something bigger. Larry explained to me that there was a group that had formed to fight the Measure N people. And they needed a spokesperson, someone straight. Would I be willing to take the responsibility? Well, this was a whole new ball game. This, I knew I would be quoted in the papers, I would be investigated by people who thought I was evil, and every mistake I made, I would be blown out of proportion. But I also knew I had to do it. So following Sunday, I let the congregation know. A few of you that are still here know, maybe you even remember that day. I explained that I was going to take this position and that my responsibilities, what they would be. I asked anyone who wanted to talk to me about it to make an appointment and come and see me. Well, with the wonderful support of this fantastic and brave congregation, I ended up on the front page of the Orange County Register, the LA Times, the Daily Pilot. There were several articles written about me in the Newport Beach paper, one of them very favorable. So I kept it. The Orange County Register ran a special editorial making me out like a Hollywood playboy, said that all the women here swooned. Is anybody swooning now? Kind of doubt it. This is what happened when you get older. So anyhow, but the good news was every time these guys ran one of these articles, another 10 to 20 people would show up. They'd do, what's going on there? And they would show up. And, I liked it. I loved it. It was a wonderful time in our history. A large percentage of the congregation really got behind the Measure N thing. We painted signs. We marched in the gay parade with our signs. It was fantastic, and this church did an amazing job, except it wasn't enough. We were defeated, and I was devastated. And I noticed most of the gay community just thought it was normal, which is another one of those little things that added to my sense of knowledge. They consoled me. Well, the main reason I share these stories is to try and explain how different the world was here 25 years ago. It was true hatred, true fear, true anger, hostility. It's hard to imagine. I received mail and email that would shock most people today if you knew what was there. I took the mail to the police department. They said, "Don't worry. We will watch it, and when you see 2 or 3 by the same hand, then we will do an investigation." I said, "Okay." Our church had graffiti painted all over it with filthy words. One day I came into my office and there were probably 100 little yellow stickies on every piece of furniture, every place you could put a little sticky. And they just had ugly stuff on it, all pointed at me. For several months, the Irvine police patrolled and came through our parking lot 5 or 6 times every afternoon and every evening. We had bomb threats. We were told not to take it too seriously. But I do know that several times when I would walk out to go to my car, I would drop my keys by accident onto the ground, and then I'd get down to pick the keys up and look underneath to see if I saw anything. No, I didn't do that. It was just maybe 5 or 6 times, but that was where my head was when I kept hearing things. About this time, I was invited to speak at an annual Gay Pride Festival. I actually had a wonderful time there. My talk went well, and as I walked around the games and the events, it seemed like everyone there seemed to know me. After it was over, I was headed home, and when I walked out of the fenced area, I suddenly realized that there were, maybe 10 or 12 guys standing there with signs, and they were standing where I had to go to get to my car. And I heard one of them shout, "That's him!" And suddenly I was surrounded by this group of protesters, and at first they were shouting Bible verses at me, and then they slowly moved into this chant of heretic, 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 heretic. One really large man and had this sign in a thing that was so big, and it had a picture of Jesus sitting there, and every time he'd yell heretic, he would lean over me like this, and I could see Jesus coming down and going up, coming down. And I really felt sorry for him. I mean, Jesus. It just tore me up. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know if I honestly was going to get out of this alive. And suddenly there were 10 or 11 guys from the festival who suddenly showed up without any fanfare, without any ugliness. They surrounded me like bees do when they surround the mother bee. Bawling is what they call it, isn't it? I think that's all good. Well, I better not deal with that. They walked me out, just kept walking with me. They said, "Just keep moving," and we just walked until we got out to the parking lot by my car, and they dispersed. A couple of them gave me some really genuine hugs, and I realized that I loved these guys. I really, really loved them. I got in the car and I said, darn it. I've been crying the whole damn thing. So at that point, I started weeping and sobbing, and I had no idea how long I sat in my car crying, and then when it was all done, I had this incredible peace that came over me. I'll never forget it. I don't know if it's ever really left me. I went from being a good pastor doing the right thing to a zealot activist. It changed everything in me. I made a promise then to myself, to God, to Jesus, to the Holy Spirit, to whatever, that if I ever had an opportunity to speak on behalf of the LGBTQ community, I would do it. I would never miss that opportunity. I'm pretty sure I kept my promise. It was about that time that Barbara Luckett came to me, who was our moderator, and she asked me a simple question. Isn't it about time we become an open and affirming church? I told Barbara, I think it's a great idea, but we did have a conversation about when we should do it. I went with her, she brought it to the council, and we decided we would become an open and affirming church. Well, then we did some research and found out that there really were no good processes that have been created for this. There were little pieces of information that these 55, Bill, where are you, whatever churches have been, but we didn't have a process, and we wanted a process. I knew that the church could vote for 51% or 55% just because of the work that we had done on Measure N. But I wanted everyone to learn to be what was going on. I wanted them to understand that we are going to be partners with these people. We are going to be partners in whatever we do. And I thought that would take some time. And so we agreed to do a 2-year process, which I think we finally shortened to 1.5 years. But we wanted it to be something that we would learn. And that's when Susan Sherman came to see me. "Ooh, I have an idea," she said. "Why don't we record the congregation going through this process so other churches can use it as a model in the future?" Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Susan. So our congregation funded the first part of this. In fact, we did a whole lot with it. I think we raised over $15,000 to get it started and get it into a place. We discovered very quickly that we had 2 sister churches that were going through this, Pilgrim United Church in Carlsbad, when Jerry Stinson was the pastor there, and First Congregational Church, where Mary Ellen Kelsby, the former Mary Ellen Kelsby, by the way, was the pastor. It was a wonderful story, a wonderful event, and we did it. At IUCC, we had gay, lesbian, transgender speakers over a period of months. We met in small groups. We met to talk. We met to share whatever it was about this. We could ask any questions we wanted. They went on for months and months. We even had private meetings where we could talk and see how we felt about it. We even talked about our sex lives. I remember when potent moment went, the Plummer Hall, as you call it, was full. Marge Cunningham, who was in her late 70s at that time, was sitting there in one of the small groups, and as I walked through there, she jumped up and she shouted, "Fred, this is so wonderful. If we can talk about our sex lives with each other, we're going to be able to talk about anything in the church." It was funny, but it was also another potent moment. After we raised enough money to make the video material that we wanted, Susan brought it over. In fact, we were out at my parents' house in Palm Springs, and we sat for hours and hours and went through all the stuff and the brilliance that she has. We finally narrowed it down. She put it into a first draft, and we looked at that looked pretty good. Susan knew what had to be done. We learned 2 things. One, what we had was important. Number 2, we didn't have enough money to finish it. So that's when I called Bill Johnson. in our national office and talked to him about our dilemma. We chatted for quite a while. He called back and said he was going to fly out. And he did that. He viewed what we had. Somehow, I don't know how he did it. It's the way these magic executives in the national office are. They can find money anywhere. I think it was roughly $15,000. It may have been more. Oh, then there was another $5,000 one. So it was like $20,000, and they agreed to market it for us. And make it we did. That video has been shown in literally tens of thousands of churches. It's virtually in every mainline denomination. I was in Australia 2 years ago, and some guys walked up to me and said, "You're the guy in the video." And I said, "What video?" And he told me that they had the video there. It's, I forget what it's something United. It's been used in at least 4 denominations that I'm aware of. The accompanying book that we put together provides vital information, and it's the one that's basically used by, or at least has been for the years, used by most of the churches that go through it. And by the way, we did become an O&A church with only 4 people that I'm aware of that walked out. It may be no surprise that they did not attend one of our workshops or any of the lectures. I've been asked many times what was my motivation. I think I can honestly say I tried to do what I thought Jesus would do today. And I mark my words, today. I know it takes a lot of interpretation, removing the boundaries that must have hindered him in those days, the belief systems that were there, all the problems that would have been very, very difficult for him to say, "Hey, I'll be an open and affirming guy." But when you look at those and see where he was then and where we are now, I am convinced that what we were doing was what Jesus would have wanted us to do. So I congratulate you. It's clear to me that not only have you inherited rich traditions, but you continue to live out a journey of faith. And I salute you. I mean that sincerely. It's a wonderful, beautiful place.